And now like everyone wants so many things in one role. Like UX, I need full stack. You need to do research, go there, do like even business stuff, impact. Because mental health is very important for you to grow. Even the I know like job market, like you need money, but still mental health is really because it's so creative role.
So I think
Hmm.
sometimes instead of over analyzing things a bit too much and trying to get the feedback and reduce uncertainty or mitigate risk, I think sometimes you just have to take that leap and move on. But I guess, yeah, in today's job application landscape, I think you have to find very interesting ways. You have to be creative when it comes to applying for jobs, because if you just submit CVs every day on LinkedIn, it's a numbers game. So visibility is very important as you move up on your career ladder or career story, if you want.
Hi Radu, thank you so much for attending this session. And today we want to discuss about the background and hiring processes in a very general time. Someone who's starting out from a very first job to transition to someone who was like senior and going for management different role. So it's a very high perspective. Let's start with your experience with this hiring and background.
Yeah, sure. Okay. In terms of UX design or just design jobs in general and creative jobs, I've been working in this field for about 15 years now. And I've worked as part of really big companies, enterprise level, and also startups. So I have a lot of experience for different sizes, different scale models, different industries as well. And I've been part of hiring processes on both sides and also medium as well. So I think what I've
Mhm.
seen some patterns that maybe might be quite similar from small companies, medium and large, but also things that only a startup could do in that context or only a bigger company could do. So that's a very short, just a really quick summary of my experience in this on this topic.
So you said you have over 15 years of experience and you already touched, like you covered the spectrum, right, from agencies to enterprise to startups. So going back 15 years back, is there a role called UX or how did it evolve into UX? Because the general talk was UX was very recent job, but I'm assuming it have to be somewhere from 90s start bubble crash because interface is everywhere. So how did it evolve into what it evolved today? Basically, the demand for the role.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think what we need to keep in mind is that UX and user experience specifically has been a job for a very long time. There's probably very few people that can say they've been in this field for, let's say, 40 years. I'm sure there's a few, but I think one thing we need to understand is that the job itself and the job title has changed over the years. So like you said, maybe if 15 years ago a UX designer or a product designer probably meant different things and probably in some cases didn't exist or people didn't really know what they are. But then as the technology progressed and the mainly the, let's say, the Apple iPhone launch happened, I think that somehow influenced some jobs and some job titles. And what I've seen in my experience, I've seen quite a lot of UX designers right now. They probably came from other fields. So they came from maybe visual design or UI design or graphic design, and they just upskilled, they learned new skills, and they moved into a more product role, which UX design usually is. So in short, I think this has evolved and it will probably evolve in 10 years from now on. It's probably going to be something completely different, right? Maybe with the help of Gen AI, it's probably going to come up and I'll be interested to see where it evolves and what it becomes.
The talk was generally with AI, we don't need any more UI designers because it can generate much more quicker, iterate through. And they also said, oh, it can understand the whole customer journey's flows too. But you said the job kept evolving from the time it started. It's not UX, UI designer, interaction designer when it started. There's some sort of role existing, but it came into more product role and the way it formed. There's continuous evolution. The underlying theme. Do you think the underlying theme is the same, or the need kept changing too as the years go by for the UX industry?
Oh, for sure, I can say the requirements have changed quite a lot for the UX role. And I think it probably what it means that it keeps getting broader. And I think one thing that maybe is not as clear is that UX and the field of UX is usually not just one thing, is not one profession. UX is a general term, it's an umbrella term for quite a few jobs and a few roles and a few very specialized areas. One such example could be information architecture or interaction design or user research, and each and one of them can stand on their own under this umbrella. So I think what happens when you call somebody or when a company requires or needs a UX designer, I think what they actually mean, they mean that you need to know quite a few disciplines that could be quite separate, they're quite individual or quite distinct from each other, that require different skills, that require different, maybe different training or different experience. And that's the overall theme for UX in general, is that it's not just one thing, it's usually many other smaller things or bigger things that kind of overlap, and you need to know what's this and what's that. And in terms of evolution, I'm pretty sure that it will evolve, and some disciplines might not be as useful and some new ones might come in. And one such example could be generative AI, that it's quite new and came in, and now we're just trying to make sense of, does it make sense? When does it make sense to use it? When can we use it? I haven't seen an example like you mentioned that Gen AI came in and that's it. There's no more need for a human behind the screen. On the contrary, I think you can actually do much more and it can help you. But at the end of the day, the way I see Gen AI, I see it as a tool, the same as Figma, the same as any kind of Adobe Creative Cloud tool. It's a tool, and you just need to understand when can you apply or when can you work with the tool and when you shouldn't. So I think that's the bigger trend. But overall, it will change and new things will come into the fold, and we will always have to learn and understand new things and new technologies and so on. So I don't think this is a cycle. I think it's a cycle that kind of repeats every 4 to 5 years.
So the thing is, you have to keep up irrespective of your discipline. And you said, even though from what I interpret what you said, the role may be same, the UX designer, the title may be the same, but the requirements of the company and the combination of skill stack may change. And other interesting thing you mentioned was Figma. It was very recent, like 10 years back. It's not that popular. Apple product Sketch and those are popular. Adobe XD. Suddenly Figma came and it took over. So it's the same with ChatGPT. It's a generative tool. It's just a tool. But yes, the things may change. Before, I'm assuming the product designers have to code the prototype. Now with Figma Advanced, they don't need to code. So there were other things. So the interesting question is how to keep up with the hiring trend. If the roles keep, my question is, example, ChatGPT came just 2 years back. And if you're applying for a senior role, they say like you have to be having like 7 years of experience. Sometimes you see like job roles with the tools you need to have, like the tool didn't even exist before. So how do you deal with those situations, especially with the hiring trends?
Yeah, I think this lies on both sides of the hiring process. So, first, you have the company side. So, the company side, usually what they will do, they will start with something that needs to get done by a certain date within a certain budget. And then there will be a decision to hire somebody because they don't currently have the skills internally. And when that decision is made, usually a job description gets put together. And usually the hiring manager or the team hiring or needing that person, they usually put a list of requirements. And then talent acquisition or human resources will just take that and put that into an ad, right? And in some cases, one of the other team might not know specifically what they need, and they will just throw into that description pretty much everything they can think of in the hope that they'll get somebody that can do all those things, right? And sometimes they'll throw in a few extras as well. And then that's the company side. On the employee side or the interviewee side, you also have people looking for jobs. And what happens is you usually go into, let's say, LinkedIn, let's take that example. You find a job title that kind of matches what you want to do. and you go and you read the description. And in some cases, that description is quite good and you understand what's needed. In some cases, it might not be as good. And you might have several roles within a UX designer or product role, the definition or description, which creates confusion, right? And then the quality of the applications will reflect that. So that's why I say it works on both sides, is because it's most definitely a need for companies to hone in and understand what's needed, right? And be able to articulate that in terms that a UX designer understands and can go and agree or disagree or say, okay, maybe I might not have that skill, but I have this skill. Or just be completely confused, and then you will get all sorts of people applying that probably don't match your needs. So I think that's number one, is usually the confusion created by job descriptions that might not really describe in the best way what's needed, or sometimes just asking for too many things and not being realistic in terms of what's done or what's needed. And I think an even bigger problem that I've seen in hiring trends over the years is that in some cases, some companies might need a UX designer. And probably when you go and you read the description, you actually understand that what they need is they need somebody that can design a tool or a product or an app or a website, and not so much to research it or to look at the information architecture. They really just need somebody with user interface skills, so UI. And but they're dressing that function up as a bit more than that, and they just keep adding things that will definitely the request a bit unclear, instead of just going in and saying, okay, we need a UI designer and we need somebody really strong in interaction, as opposed to dressing that up as something that that job might not be. And then as it happens, you apply for the role, you go to the interview, let's say you get the job, and then you will end up being disappointed because you end up just doing UI and there's nothing of the other X process embedded task that you were expecting. In summary, what we need to make sure is that on the company side, we have a very clean and accurate description of what they need that is quite pertinent to that UX role. And on the other side, the person trying to find a job is to make sure that they have a way to give feedback or to understand or make sure that you collect some kind of acknowledgement. That's something that people need or people understand what it is. And usually that translates into the quality of the applications for that role. So that's the feedback loop that goes into that process. So that's in short, I think, where some of the issues and some of the opportunities might be with the hiring process.
So, is this the trend? Sometimes they were like fan companies, they have particular process, but majority of the jobs in the market are not from the five companies. And this is a common pattern. I'm assuming like if it's a startup, it's really hard to gauge like what they need as a designer, explaining to them like what exactly do you need, because there won't be much commitment to answer in reality because they were busy, and there may not be much communication. Taking from what's in control of the employee who's looking for a next opportunity, what is the best way in this hiring environment to find the right fit? Because sometimes you don't know what type of job you need. And sometimes when you agree to a contract, you'll be locked in for some time. And that may affect your CV too if you do like job hopping. And how do the employee in this hiring environment, especially now with the chat GPT, like so many AI scraping job descriptions, and also people like generating chat GPT resumes, like to make it is becoming, there's a good side, but it was being misused. And now like everyone wants so many things in one role. Like UX, I need full stack, you need to do research, go there, do like even business stuff, BA stuff. So until the person goes into that, they negotiate, but immediately the job title changes. Sometimes due to market situations or other commitments in life, they're locked in. Even though they spoke during the HR process, they agreed, but immediately they changed. The role was changed in some way. Same title, everything, but the requirements, the work they're doing is changing. With the hiring in these scenarios, this is how like I observe, how do the employee make a right decision? To read is impossible if it changes after they start and agreed, but how do they reduce these chances in this hiring environment?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I've seen this happen with some of my mentees and some of my friends. And I've seen this happen with me as well. So it does happen that you sometimes go in, is the dream job, you get the job, and then as you get to experience the job firsthand, not everything might align with what that original discussion was or what the job spec was. And I think there's always some kind of misalignment between the job spec and reality, because a job ad or a job description is always meant to sound maybe way, way better than it actually is, because they're trying to
The
attract
action.
top talent. So by the very definition, it's a job ad, right? I think its purpose is to sell that job, to sell that company. So, what you can do to reduce that uncertainty before you join a company is to, first of all, make sure that the company is reputable, that you check the stats on LinkedIn, maybe you check Glassdoor or a few other websites, maybe check some and see if you can find some feedback from maybe current or former employees. But in most cases, it might just mean to reaching out to your network and just asking if anybody has experience with that company, and see if you're connected to anybody in that company. Ask questions before you actually start interviewing. Maybe ask questions, especially during the interview process, and try and understand what happens there. What's the process? What's the makeup of the team? And what I tend to do myself, I tend to have those conversations as early as I can to try and understand about the makeup and the psychology and the overall structure of the team or the company. And then when I actually go in to a conversation or an interview with the hiring manager or the team or even the recruiter, I always try to ask questions to verify what's their take on that specific subject. Will they tell me the same thing as the person I know on the inside? Would they dress it up? Would
Mm-hmm.
they be honest and expose the problem, or just completely ignore it and tell me a different story? So that usually tends to give you a lot of data in terms of who you're dealing with and what you might get once you get the role. But at the same time, I know that currently and even in the past, the job market for design positions, for UX, for product design has always been very competitive. And you see sometimes job ads going in today and they already have 100 applicants within the first 24 hours, if not even more. So it's a very competitive market. So to that point, to what extent can you afford to be picky and really split the thread and really analyze and understand if that's something you want or need or you want to get engaged? So there is really a balance for each and every applicant, right? There's each and one of us have different needs and desires, and we all need to approach this from that perspective of this is personal to me. What do I need? How far am I willing to go to get this job? So I think it really depends on the case. It's hard to give an answer that maybe applies to everybody at the same time.
Okay, because the job market is hard nowadays, it's getting very fluctuated, sometimes very high in demand. The cycle is getting much more quicker, highs and downs with no stability. But a person with experience, they can make like they may have some financial security, they can risk the job, and they can also know like when they're asking questions, something is wrong there, something doesn't align. It doesn't need to be wrong. Something doesn't align with me. Something is wrong. It's not for me. But what about the person, like a junior or grad who's desperate to take a job, or like a little bit experienced person who can maybe if they try harder, they may get opportunities, but like they don't have much experience, like or they have really very bad experience, and it is less bad the next company, but it's still not a good company. How do they like know? Is there any check they can do before? Am I committing? How much impact? Because mental health is very important for you to grow. Even the I know like job market, like you need money, but still mental health is really because it's so creative role. Is there any tip they can know? Okay, I'm trying hard to find a job and I got this opportunity and I had a really bad experience with an other company. Or I have a good experience, but I'm looking for a salary hike. I really need the money. So how do they know? Like basically, is there one question they have to check, even without experience?
Yeah, I think it's probably very difficult to give a magic kind of solution that just applies to everybody. My main advice here will still be to really look around and see, are there any opportunities for you in your current role? Can you do something more? Maybe can you ask around? Are there any projects that you could apply your UX skill or UX process and learn something from it? And if you're in a position where you're fed up or you just can't work in the company for various reasons, then are you willing to take that leap of faith and just say, I'm pretty sure the next job, even if it's bad, is probably not going to be as bad? So I think
Mm.
sometimes instead of over analyzing things a bit too much and trying to get the feedback and reduce uncertainty or mitigate risk, I think sometimes you just have to take that leap and move on if that's the case. Like you said, mental health, burnout, they're all real things and they happen to
Mhm.
many of us. And it's not a great position to be in. So if you can avoid that, and if you have that security in terms of finance, or if you know that you have already a job, you're not in a rush, maybe you can be a bit more, do a bit more research, you have a bit more time, definitely reach out to inside the company, see who you know, or see if you have any connections that have worked at that company, and try and get some intel, try and get some feedback and see what's it like inside. Am I going into a healthy environment or am I going into a nut house? And that really depends, right? Now, of course, there's always the question of, is it a small company? Is it a startup? Is it an agency? Is it a bigger company? Is it an enterprise level? Each and one of them, they'll have their own dynamics, their own requirements. So you can expect in a startup, you can expect to, by definition, to wear many hats on any different day, right? So by definition, when you join a startup, you should expect that you might be a bit busier. You will probably be required to do different things that might not be necessarily within your UX remit or scope, but you will have to do them because it's a startup, it's a small thing, and you might get some really interesting points of view there. If it's an agency, agencies tend to expose you to quite a lot of work, a lot of clients, different industries, and you get involved into many projects. And sometimes within the same week, you might be working on 3 different industries and 4 different projects, right? So fast paced, you know what to expect when you join an agency. If it's an enterprise or an in-house team, let's say a product team or design team in a larger company, maybe medium sized to large, you can expect things to take a bit longer because of politics and company structure. Of course, if you are 7 or 8 levels away from the CEO, you will expect some kind of
Mhm.
delay in comms. You will probably always, it will take a bit longer for you to get a project off the ground. But at the same time, you can take advantage of that kind of speed or speed difference and try and do things to a more in depth level. If you do research, maybe you spend a bit more time analyzing things and creating insights and working on design systems just because the scope and the potential to manage at scale. So I think all those combined, you have to consider them. And if you don't know and you don't have intel on the company itself, try and see within that industry and within that company structure, what should you expect before you join? And maybe manage your expectations that
Mhm.
way. And of course, ask the recruiter, ask the hiring manager. Don't be afraid if you get to that stage to gather the intel you need to make that decision.
So it's basically, if you, the takeaways, if you can't talk to hiring manager, can't get into the like in any manner, run with the common grain of salt. If it's an enterprise, just common sense. Is it a big or a small, or is it just a startup? Then you get the general baseline, then you can figure it out. If you go to the hiring manager, then you can access it. Assess like how much depth, what is the role exactly. Sometimes even at the like smaller companies, they may be like a specialist, so many contractors, maybe like they're looking for a cheap graduate or very like low experience just to do a small stuff. So I think it's generally depends. You have to ask the people at the end to know the real truth, but you can run with the common sense. Okay, this is what happening. So they were like, how to find the job? Actually, they were like, okay, before we get into talking to the people, we research it, right? And we thought, oh, that role is perfect for me. I want to work for that company. But how to exactly find a job? Because the reason I'm asking, because now with the chat GPT and everything, with the AI too, like it's really hard to predict. Like even though your ATS score is 8 or 9, you get like automated rejection. And how exactly is it like in traditional now? did the table reverse? Like again, is it a traditional networking to get a job or next opportunity? Or how exactly to strategize this like job search? Once you decide, okay, now I'm confident, I want to go for digital agency. I know I'm going to get a very broad experience in all industries in a very less time. Or no, I want to take it stable, I want to only work in one which I know. I better develop my design skills. I'm not so curious about other industries. So once they decided, how exactly will they find a job? How to strategize finding a job?
Yeah, there's multiple ways to do that. And rightly, you mentioned that now with generative AI, it seems like all the applications have lifted up by a notch, right, in terms of quality, or at least you will hope so. So first of all, you need to make sure you optimize your CV, right, and keep in mind that specific roles, like you said, have that applicant tracking system, the ATS, that monitors and scans for keywords to make sure that you fit or you're fit for that job. You have all the skills needed. So, in most cases, that just simply means that you need to optimize your CV to match to some extent the requirements in the job description. So, the use of keywords specific to that role, the maybe some of the examples, the companies, how you phrase that descriptions in terms of achievements. So, I think it actually means you do have a Gen AI tool that can help you, but you also have no excuse now not to customize your approach for that specific job. And I think you can also go the exact opposite way, which is a spray and pray, where you just create one set of CV and portfolio and basically the letter that you need, and just use the same and apply for 100 jobs a day, right? And do it through a bot or do it through some kind of automation. And that absolutely you can do that. But I don't know if that's going to generate the results you expect, because if everybody would do that, that just means every job ad will just get so many applications that will make it very hard for the person hiring to actually go through all of them, right? So at some point within the first 24 hours, they'll probably stop the application process because they can't parse all that much. Or maybe they won't pause it, but they will just simply not check all the application. They'll just check those CVs that have been highlighted as potential, that have potential. So we will never know how an applicant tracking system is set up. It's always a game. You're playing with something you can't see. It's behind a mirror and you can't figure out the details. But the best way is to optimize, make sure you're targeted, make sure your intent and the keywords and everything are specific to that role, and then make sure that when you apply, you do it through either a referral. So try and get to the person or get to a person inside the company that could potentially put you in to that recruitment process without you having to do it through a public link, right? Sometimes internal referrals can weigh a bit more than just a public application. That's probably one, and it's hard to do because if you don't know anybody on the inside of the company, it's going to be difficult to do that. But you can always try. You can always try and send a few messages to people on the design team or the product team. Ask them a question, ask them for feedback, ask them for advice. Tell them that you've seen this role and you're interested in applying. Would they have any advice on how to successfully get an interview? And see if they have, or they know, or they can recommend you to somebody on the inside. So I think that's probably one way of treating the application and trying to be a bit more targeted. But I guess, yeah, in today's job application landscape, I think you have to find very interesting ways. You have to be creative when it comes to applying for jobs, because if you just submit CVs every day on LinkedIn, it's a numbers game. It's tough to stay on top of. And even after getting 100 rejections, you're probably not going to feel the same as after getting 5 rejections that were very targeted and very specific. So I think you have to understand that dynamic and try and work with that if you can.
Just a follow-up question on this. So if I see the job boards, or if anyone sees the job boards, you rarely see like VP of design, director of design, maybe occasionally lead of design, but most of the things are UX designer mid to like senior product designer. So as you advanced in the career, how do you find if you move to a different country like Dublin, I from Germany to Dublin, you really don't know anyone, you try to network, but you really need a job, and but you're at like a director level or very high level. lead or director or even VP level. How do you, apart from recruitment agencies, how do you exactly network and find? Because there were so many companies, and most companies have head of design, director of design, they need it, but none of the postings are actually publicly posted most of the time. How to do that in that scenario?
Yeah. So as you progress through your design career and you get to more senior levels and you want to progress maybe from a lead role to a principal role, or you want to move from a principal role to a managing role or a UX manager, or maybe like you said, from a UX manager, you just want to go for directly for a director role. Those roles, as the more you move up, the less of those roles you will see, I think. And this is my
Mhm.
experience within the Irish market. Probably Europe and more specifically the UK, Germany, like you mentioned, they're bigger markets. So there's probably a lot more opportunity available. But I think for the Irish market, one thing that I've seen working to some extent is to try and be visible, and not just to be
And
visible when you need a role or when you're looking to change job or you're looking to progress in your career. I think you have to start increasing your visibility a year or maybe two or even five before you actually want to move. And what I mean by visibility is to take part in discussions, community forums, meetups, participate, mentor, expand your network on different events. Make sure that people know you, even if not by name, at least they've seen you somewhere and they think they know you, but they're not sure where they've seen you before. That's also a good sign. Try and write articles. If you can, if you have it in you, try and write a book, become an expert. I think it's all to do with increasing the visibility and just showing that you're the absolute master of that domain, whatever that domain might be. So this probably applies to roles outside of UX for sure, applies to pretty much everything. So visibility is very important as you move up on your career ladder or career story, if you want.
so that was such an interesting. So I want to ask you, like, what is your key takeaway with the background, like from the background, what the evolution we did, like how the roles evolve, and one constant is going to keep changing. Now it is Chat GPT. You provide a very good example how to use it productively. So apart from the seniority roles, so let's break it down into two ways, right? One is from grad to senior level, where the job actually postings are there. A tip for them how to strategically do the job such and increase your chances. There is no guarantee you can be perfect fit, but luck plays a role, but just increase your chances. And from lead to upper level, VP, head of design, like so much higher level, what would for them would be a strategic tip? Because I'm assuming it would be that completely two different buckets. So yeah.
Okay, so the biggest probably insight is to approach your journey as a project, to really look at cataloging and keeping track of trends and also understanding what you want to do. Make sure your goals are clear. And also, when your goals are clear and you know the type of jobs you want to apply for, make sure you find the companies with the right roles. And then when you apply, make sure you customize your application. Make sure it's very unique to that job. So spend a bit of time, use the tools that you have at your disposal, and really customize your application, your cover letter, your CV, your portfolio, your case studies. Make sure they speak uniquely to that role. And then, as a second point, once you, let's say, you get past that first screening and you're invited for the interview, try and find somebody on the inside, somebody working from that company or working that maybe has worked on that in that company, and try and get some intel, try and get some data or some points about the team, about how they work, about how they deliver stuff, about the tools they use, the kind of issues they have. And, that will always help. And then the one thing that probably you do as you progress through this journey is to make sure you're always visible. So you start increasing your visibility, you start publishing things, you participate in the community, you give back, try and mentor people if you can. You will always learn different things and different approaches from that interaction. Try and stay as visible as you can, not just when you actually need to look for that job. So your LinkedIn should be abuzz with posts and notes and thoughts and different entries that could potentially keep you visible in the eyes of potential employers. So I think in short, that's pretty much the essential points you need to remember. And then as an extra point, make sure you understand that Gen AI is a tool, the same as Figma and the same as everything else, and you use it accordingly. So there's no point jumping into Figma if you don't know how to use layers or if you don't know how to use specific things to create a prototype. So the same with Gen AI. Make sure you have the basic understanding of how to write a prompt, how long should a prompt be, what kind of things should you mention or can you mention. So make sure you spend a bit of time understanding that it's a tool and also that you need to train yourself to understand how to use the tool efficiently. So I think overall that's probably just a really quick summary of everything we covered today.
Perfect. I think there's like a lot of takeaways. One of my favorite is how to use AI in a very productive way, and it's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your
Yeah, thank you
wisdom.
for having me.
Thank